The sharp crack of a pistol shot echoed through the dusty streets of Willow Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1874, as Sophia Taylor's world shattered like the storefront window behind her. It wasn't the bullet that had destroyed everything, it was the letter clutched in her trembling hands, ink smudged with tears, informing her that David, her husband of 3 years, had emptied their bank account and fled with a saloon girl to California. "Mrs. Taylor? Are you quite all right?" Mrs. Peabody from the general store called, her concerned voice barely registering through Sophia's shock. Sophia's auburn hair had come loose from its careful arrangement, strands clinging to her tear-stained cheeks as she stared blankly at the chaotic main street. The sheriff was shouting at some drunken miners who'd been responsible for the gunshot, a foolish celebration gone wrong, but all Sophia could think about was the empty house she'd returned to, and the emptier future that awaited her. "Yes, I'm fine," she lied, folding the letter with shaking fingers and tucking it into her pocket. She wasn't fine. She was 24 years old, abandoned, and according to the bank manager who delivered the devastating news with cold politeness, completely penniless. Sophia straightened her spine, ignoring the concerned glances from passers-by. This wasn't the first challenge life had thrown at her, though it certainly ranked among the cruelest. Orphaned at 16 and married at 21 to a man who'd promised stability and protection, she now found herself utterly alone in a frontier town where women without means had precious few respectable options. The boarding house where she'd been staying would expect this week's payment by sundown. The dress shop where she worked part-time would barely cover food, let alone lodging. As she walked down the dusty street toward what had once been her home, Sophia's mind raced through increasingly desperate calculations. 3 days later, Sophia stood on the porch of the small house she'd made a home, watching as the bank representative hammered a foreclosure notice to the front door. Her few personal belongings were packed in a single trunk beside her. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Taylor, but your husband's debts exceed the value of the property," the man explained without meeting her eyes. "The bank will sell the house to recover what it can." Sophia nodded numbly, too exhausted for fresh tears. She'd spent 72 hours begging for extensions, seeking help from acquaintances, and searching for additional work. But in a town like Willow Creek, sympathy ran shallow, and opportunity for women ran shallower. "Do you have somewhere to go?" the man asked, a flicker of genuine concern crossing his face. "Of course," she lied. Pride was about all she had left. As the bank man rode away, Sophia stood paralyzed on the porch that was no longer hers. The spring sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the yard where she'd planted snapdragons just weeks ago. They were beginning to bloom tiny buds of yellow and red that would now brighten someone else's days. The creak of wagon wheels drew her attention to the road. A loaded supply wagon approached, pulled by 2 sturdy horses. The driver, a broad-shouldered man with a weather-beaten hat pulled low, slowed as he neared her house. "Afternoon, madam," he called, his voice deep and measured. "You look like you might be in need of assistance." Sophia bristled, despite her desperate circumstances. "I'm quite capable, thank you," she replied, though the trunk at her feet and the foreclosure notice flapping in the breeze told a different story. The man brought his wagon to a complete stop and studied her for a moment. He had the unhurried confidence of someone accustomed to assessing difficult situations. "Name's Daniel O'Connor," he said, removing his hat to reveal sun-streaked brown hair and eyes the color of worn leather. "I've got a ranch about 10 miles west. I'm heading back that way now if you need a ride somewhere." Sophia hesitated. She'd been raised to be cautious around strangers, especially men. But the boarding house had already rented her room to a traveling salesman, and the town offered no shelter for a woman without funds. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. O'Connor, but I don't know you." He nodded, accepting her caution without offense. "That's fair enough. I know Mrs. Abernathy over at the Mercantile. She can vouch for me if you'd like." Before Sophia could respond, the unmistakable sound of thunder rolled across the distant mountains. Dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, promising a spring storm that would drench everything in its path. Daniel glanced at the sky. "Storms coming. Whatever your troubles are, madam, facing them soaked to the bone won't improve matters." Sophia looked from the foreclosure notice to her single trunk, then to the gathering storm clouds. Whatever pride she had left wasn't worth pneumonia. "I don't have anywhere to go," she admitted, the words like stones in her throat. "My husband left town after emptying our accounts. The bank has taken the house." Daniel's expression darkened for a moment before settling back into careful neutrality. "I'm sorry to hear that. It's no small thing to be left without resources." He paused, seeming to consider something before continuing. "I've got a proposition for you, Mrs. Taylor. Sophia Taylor. Mrs. Taylor. My ranch has been without a housekeeper since my mother passed last winter. It's honest work with fair pay, your own room, and meals included. It would give you time to get back on your feet, make some plans." Sophia studied him carefully. Daniel O'Connor appeared to be in his early 30s, tall and solid, with the tanned complexion of a man who worked outdoors. His clothes were worn but clean, his wagon well maintained, both suggesting someone who took care of his possessions. "Why would you offer such a position to a complete stranger?" she asked, suspicion threading through her voice. A small smile touched his lips. "My mother would haunt me if I left a woman in distress with a storm bearing down. Besides, finding reliable help out here isn't easy. Most prefer town life to ranch isolation." The first fat raindrops began to fall, spattering the dusty ground with dark spots. "What would my duties include?" Sophia asked, practical concerns pushing through her hesitation. "Cooking, cleaning, mending, running the household. I've got 2 ranch hands who bunk in the stable, but they take their meals in the main house." He paused. "It's respectable work, Mrs. Taylor. You'd be treated with nothing but courtesy." The rain began to fall more steadily. Sophia glanced once more at her former home, then back to Daniel O'Connor. She had few options and fewer friends in Willow Creek. Whatever the risks of accepting this stranger's offer, they seemed less immediate than the certainty of having nowhere to sleep tonight. "I accept your offer, Mr. O'Connor," she said, straightening her shoulders. "But I want to be clear, this is a business arrangement. I'll work hard, but I expect to be treated fairly." He nodded, jumping down from the wagon to help with her trunk. "I wouldn't have it any other way." As he lifted her trunk with surprising ease, he added, "You'll want for nothing with me, Mrs. Taylor. That's a promise." The words hung between them, weighted with more meaning than either could fully grasp in that moment. As the rain fell harder, Sophia climbed up onto the wagon seat, leaving behind the ruins of one life and facing the uncertain dawn of another. The journey to Daniel O'Connor's ranch passed mostly in silence, broken only by the occasional commentary about landmarks or the worsening weather. The rain came down in sheets, forcing them to travel slowly along muddy roads that wound through rolling hills dotted with sagebrush and scrub pine. "Sorry about the weather," Daniel said as he guided the horses through a particularly muddy stretch. "You're getting a proper Wyoming welcome." Sophia managed a small smile despite her soaked clothing and tumultuous emotions. "I've lived in the territory for 3 years, Mr. O'Connor. This isn't my first spring storm." "Daniel," he corrected. "If we're going to be sharing a roof, Mr. O'Connor seems overly formal." She hesitated, then nodded. "Daniel, then, and you may call me Sophia." As they crested a final hill, the O'Connor ranch came into view below them. It was larger than Sophia had expected, a substantial 2-story house with a wide porch, flanked by a barn, corral, and several outbuildings. Fields stretched out on one side, and a small creek wound its way along the property's edge. "It's lovely," she said, genuinely surprised by the well-maintained appearance of the place. Daniel's expression softened with evident pride. "My father built that house with his own hands when he claimed this land 20 years ago. Added onto it as the ranch grew. He was determined my mother would have a proper home, not just a cabin." They pulled up to the barn, where Daniel helped Sophia down before quickly unhitching the team. A young man appeared from inside, taking the horse's reins. "This is Jim," Daniel said. "One of my ranch hands. Jim, this is Mrs. Taylor. She'll be taking over as housekeeper." Jim touched his hat respectfully. "Madam, glad to have you. Boss's cooking has been testing our constitution something fierce." Despite everything, Sophia found herself smiling at the young man's candor. "I'll do my best to ensure you all survive then." Daniel led her through the rain to the house, carrying her trunk as if it weighed nothing. The interior was clean but clearly showed the absence of a woman's touch, functional rather than comfortable, with mismatched furniture and bare walls save for a few family photographs. "My room is at the end of the hall upstairs," Daniel explained, leading her up a solid staircase. "This will be yours." He opened a door to reveal a pleasant bedroom with simple furnishings: a bed, dresser, washstand, and rocking chair positioned near a window that would offer a view of the distant mountains when the storm cleared. "It was my mother's sewing room," he said, setting down her trunk. "I had Jim move in the bed from the spare room. Thought you'd appreciate the extra space." Sophia stepped inside, touched by the consideration. "It's perfect. Thank you. Bathrooms at the end of the hall. We've got indoor plumbing. My father insisted on the most modern conveniences for my mother." A flicker of grief crossed his face before he continued. "Kitchen's fully stocked, though you might want to rearrange things to your liking. I'll show you around properly tomorrow when the weather clears." Sophia nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the day's events. "I appreciate everything you've done, Daniel. Truly." He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You've had a difficult day, Sophia. Get some rest. We can discuss duties and wages in the morning." After he left, Sophia sank onto the edge of the bed, the enormity of her situation finally crashing over her. Her marriage, her home, her security all gone in the span of a few days. Yet here she was, in a stranger's house, dependent on his continued goodwill. She allowed herself a few minutes of silent tears before rising to unpack her meager belongings. Whatever tomorrow brought, she would face it with as much dignity as she could muster. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having passed during the night. Sophia woke early, years of habit driving her from bed despite her exhaustion. She dressed in her simplest dress, one of only 3 she'd been able to bring, and made her way downstairs, determined to begin earning her keep immediately. The kitchen was spacious and well-equipped, though showing signs of masculine neglect. Sophia quickly located the essentials and set about preparing breakfast, finding comfort in the familiar routine of cooking. By the time footsteps sounded on the stairs, she had coffee brewing, biscuits in the oven, and bacon sizzling in a cast-iron skillet. Daniel appeared in the doorway, looking momentarily startled to find her already at work. He'd clearly just come in from morning chores, his shirt sleeves rolled up and boots muddy from the previous night's rain. "Good morning," Sophia said, suddenly self-conscious. "I hope you don't mind that I started breakfast." "Mind? I'm grateful," he replied, removing his hat. "Though I didn't expect you to begin work immediately. You could have taken time to settle in." Sophia turned back to the stove, flipping the bacon with practiced ease. "I prefer to keep busy. Besides, I'm eager to establish my usefulness." Something in her tone must have revealed more than she intended, because Daniel's expression grew serious. "Your position here isn't contingent on proving yourself in the first day. Sophia. This isn't a test. Before she could respond, the back door opened, and Jim entered with another young man. "Morning, Mrs. Taylor," Jim called cheerfully. "This here's Elijah, our other hand. Eli, this is Mrs. Taylor, come to save us from the boss's cooking." Elijah, a lanky young man with a shock of red hair, nodded respectfully. "Madam, that sure smells better than anything we've had in months." Breakfast passed pleasantly, with the men discussing the day's work while Sophia observed. Daniel ran his ranch with quiet efficiency, giving clear instructions without unnecessary words. The ranch hands clearly respected him, though their relationship seemed more familial than strictly employer-employee. After the men departed for their morning tasks, Daniel remained behind to help Sophia clear the table, despite her protests. "About your wages," he said as they worked. "I can offer $20 a month, plus room and board. It's not a fortune, but it's fair for these parts." Sophia nearly dropped the plate she was washing. It was twice what she'd made at the dress shop, with no expenses to worry about. "That's more than generous," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Daniel shrugged. "It's what the work is worth. I'll pay you at the month's end, but if you need an advance for personal items, just ask." Sophia turned to face him, needing to understand this man who'd offered salvation when she needed it most. "Why are you being so kind to me?" His expression softened. "I told you my mother raised me better than to leave someone in need. Besides, I understand what it's like to have your life upended without warning." He paused. "When my parents died within months of each other last year, I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. Having purpose the ranch to run, responsibilities to meet, that's what saved me." The simple honesty in his words resonated with something in Sophia. "Thank you for sharing that with me, and for giving me purpose when I most needed it." He nodded, seemingly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "I'll show you around the ranch after you've finished here. You should know the place if you're going to be running the household." The tour took most of the morning, with Daniel patiently explaining the operation of the ranch. They raised cattle primarily, with some horses they bred and trained for sale. The property spanned nearly 2,000 acres, with grazing lands stretching toward distant mountains. "It's beautiful," Sophia said as they stood on a rise overlooking a meadow where cattle grazed. Spring wildflowers dotted the landscape with splashes of color. "It is," Daniel agreed, his voice warm with pride. "My father chose well when he settled here. Good water, good grass, protected valley." As they walked back toward the house, Sophia gathered her courage to ask the question that had been on her mind. "Your mother, you mentioned she passed recently. May I ask what happened?" Daniel's stride faltered slightly. "Influenza. Took her in 3 days. My father had passed from a heart ailment just 4 months prior." He paused. They were married 32 years. I don't think he wanted to live without her, truth be told. "I'm sorry," Sophia said softly. "They sound like remarkable people." They were. A small smile crossed his face. "They would have liked you. Especially my mother. She was always concerned I'd end up a confirmed bachelor, running this place alone until I was old and gray." The comment hung between them, neither acknowledging the implications. Instead, they continued their walk in companionable silence, each lost in private thoughts. The days quickly settled into a rhythm. Sophia rose early to prepare breakfast, managed the household throughout the day, and served dinner in the evening. Daniel and his men worked from dawn until dusk, returning with appetites that appreciated Sophia's skilled cooking without reservation. After 2 weeks, Sophia found herself humming as she hung laundry on the line behind the house. The simple domesticity of the tasks had become comforting rather than burdensome. Here, unlike in her marriage, her efforts were acknowledged and appreciated. "That's a pretty tune," Daniel said. approaching from the barn. Sophia startled, not having heard him approach. My mother used to sing it while she worked. I hadn't realized I was humming it. It suits you, he said, then seemed embarrassed by his own observation. I mean, you seem more settled than when you arrived. She smiled, pinning one of his shirts to the line. I am. This place has been good for me. She hesitated, then added, You've been good for me, Daniel. Your kindness has meant more than I can express. He shifted, uncomfortable with praise as always. It's nothing, just doing what's right. It's not nothing, she insisted. When David left me, I thought. She stopped, surprised to find tears threatening. I thought I'd failed somehow, that I wasn't enough. Daniel's expression hardened at the mention of her husband. A man who abandons his wife doesn't deserve her loyalty or her tears. The failure was his, Sophia. Never doubt that. Before she could respond, Jim came running from the pasture, shouting Daniel's name. Boss, that new bull's broken through the south fence. He's heading for William's property. Daniel was already moving. Saddle my horse, he called back, then turned to Sophia. I'm sorry this could take hours. Williams has been looking for an excuse to cause trouble since I outbid him on that land last year. Go, she urged. I'll keep dinner warm. He hesitated just a moment, then impulsively reached out to squeeze her hand before running toward the barn. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through Sophia, leaving her staring after him with the damp shirt still clutched in her other hand. That evening, when Daniel hadn't returned by sunset, Sophia found herself pacing the porch, scanning the darkening landscape for signs of his return. When she finally spotted 3 riders approaching, relief flooded through her with an intensity that should have been alarming. Daniel dismounted wearily, his clothes mud-splattered and his expression grim. Jim and Elijah led the horses toward the barn, looking equally exhausted. We got him back, Daniel said as he climbed the porch steps. But not before Williams threatened to shoot the animal and send me the bill. Are you hurt? Sophia asked, noticing he was favoring his right leg. Just wrenched my knee when the horse slipped in the mud. Nothing serious. Sophia frowned. Sit down and eat. Then I'm looking at that knee whether you like it or not. To her surprise, he didn't argue, following her into the house with a tired smile. After she'd fed all 3 men and sent the hands to their quarters, she insisted on examining Daniel's injury. It's not necessary, he protested weakly as she knelt before his chair with a basin of warm water. Hush, she said, gently rolling up his pant leg to reveal an already swelling knee. This needs cold compresses and rest, or you'll be no use to your ranch tomorrow. As she bathed the mud from his leg and applied a cold compress, a charged silence fell between them. Sophia became acutely aware of the intimacy of the moment, her hands on his bare skin. His face softened in the lamplight, the quiet house enveloping them. Thank you, he said softly, for caring. She looked up to find him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Someone should, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They remained like that for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them before Sophia finally broke the spell, rising to her feet. You should rest, she said, gathering the basin and cloths. Dr. Peterson should look at that knee if it's not better by morning. Daniel nodded, though they both knew he wouldn't send for the doctor over something he considered minor. Good night, Sophia. Good night, Daniel. As she climbed the stairs to her room later, Sophia was forced to acknowledge what she'd been trying to ignore for days. She was developing feelings for Daniel O'Connor that went well beyond gratitude or friendly affection. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. She was still technically married, even if David had abandoned her. Moreover, she was Daniel's employee, dependent on him for her livelihood and shelter. Complicated didn't begin to describe it. May turned to June, and life on the ranch grew busier with the changing season. Cattle needed moving to summer pastures, fences required mending after winter damage, and the vegetable garden Sophia had planted began to flourish, requiring daily attention. On a particularly warm afternoon, Sophia was in the garden when the sound of an approaching wagon drew her attention. A woman she didn't recognize drove a smart buggy up the lane, reining her horse to a stop near the house. "Hello there," the woman called, waving a gloved hand. "You must be Mrs. Taylor. I'm Rebecca Wilson, Daniel's neighbor to the east." Sophia brushed soil from her hands and walked to greet the visitor. Rebecca Wilson was perhaps 40, fashionably dressed and possessed of a friendly but assessing gaze. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Wilson. Daniel mentioned your ranch." "Did he now?" Rebecca smiled. "And what else has Daniel mentioned about me, I wonder?" Something in the woman's tone put Sophia immediately on guard. "Very little, I'm afraid. I've only been here a month." Rebecca descended from her buggy with practiced grace. "Well, I've known Daniel since he was a boy following his father around in two big boots. His mother, God rest her soul, was my dearest friend." She glanced around. "Is he about?" "He's checking cattle in the north pasture. He should return by dinner." "Perfect," Rebecca declared. "Then we have time for a proper chat." "I've been dying to meet the woman who's finally convinced Daniel O'Connor to end his stubborn bachelorhood." Sophia felt heat rising to her cheeks. "Oh, there's been a misunderstanding. I'm just the housekeeper." Rebecca's eyebrows rose in obvious disbelief. "Are you indeed? Well, that's not the impression I got from Mabel Jenkins at the Mercantile. She said Daniel was absolutely smitten when he introduced you last week." The shopping trip to town had been pleasant, with Daniel proudly introducing Sophia to various merchants. Had his manner suggested something more than an employer's courtesy? "Mrs. Wilson, Rebecca, please." "Rebecca, I assure you, my relationship with Daniel is strictly professional. I needed work after my husband abandoned me, and Daniel needed a housekeeper." The older woman's expression softened. "My dear, I didn't mean to embarrass you. It's just that I've known Daniel a long time, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way Mabel described him looking at you." She patted Sophia's arm. "But enough of my matchmaking. Show me this garden you've planted." Catherine Daniel's mother would be delighted to see these beds flourishing again. By the time Daniel returned from the pastures, Sophia and Rebecca were sitting on the porch drinking lemonade, their initial awkwardness replaced by genuine rapport. Rebecca had shared stories of Daniel's childhood that had Sophia laughing until tears came to her eyes. "What's all this?" Daniel asked as he approached, looking pleased but suspicious at finding the women together. "Rebecca was just telling me about the time you decided to break your father's new stallion when you were 12, Sophia said, still smiling. Daniel groaned. "I should have known you'd dig up all my embarrassing moments, Becky." "Someone has to keep you humble, Daniel," Rebecca replied with affection. "Besides, Sophia and I were getting acquainted. It's high time you brought her around for dinner at our place." An awkward silence fell as Daniel and Sophia exchanged glances. "Actually, Rebecca misunderstood our arrangement," Sophia began. "I've already been thoroughly corrected," Rebecca interjected smoothly. "But my dinner invitation stands. Neighbors should be neighborly, regardless of arrangements." After Rebecca departed, promising to send a formal dinner invitation soon, Daniel and Sophia found themselves alone on the porch as the sun began to set, painting the sky in spectacular oranges and pinks. "I'm sorry if Rebecca made you uncomfortable," Daniel said. "She's known me too long not to meddle." Sophia shook her head. "She was lovely. And the stories about your parents helped me understand where you come from, why you're the man you are." Daniel leaned against the porch railing, studying her. And what kind of man is that, in your estimation? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Sophia chose her words carefully. A good one, honest, kind, the sort who offers shelter to a stranger in a storm. She paused. The sort who makes a woman feel safe when she's lost everything. His expression softened. You give me too much credit. I don't think I do, she replied quietly. The tension between them was palpable, charged with unspoken feelings. Daniel took a step toward her, then seemed to catch himself. I should see to the horses, he said, his voice rough. Sophia nodded, both relieved and disappointed. And I should start dinner. As June turned to July, the undercurrent of attraction between them grew increasingly difficult to ignore. They developed 100 small intimacies, the way Daniel always carried in water for her washbasin without being asked. How Sophia learned to recognize his footsteps and have coffee poured by the time he entered the kitchen. The evenings spent reading by the fire, comfortable in shared silence. One particularly hot afternoon, Sophia was picking green beans when she heard shouting from the direction of the barn. She ran toward the commotion to find Daniel and Jim struggling with a thrashing horse while Elijah lay motionless on the ground nearby. What happened? She called. New mare kicked him, Daniel answered tersely. Jim, get this animal secured. Sophia, help me with Eli. They carried the unconscious young man to the house, where Sophia quickly prepared the sofa. Blood matted Elijah's hair where the horse's hoof had struck him. We need the doctor, Sophia said, examining the wound. Daniel nodded grimly. Jim's already riding for town. Help me clean him up while we wait. Working together, they bathed Elijah's wound and made him as comfortable as possible. When the young man finally stirred, moaning in pain, Sophia held his hand while Daniel checked his pupils. Easy, Eli, Daniel said. Doc's on his way. You took a nasty kick, but you're too hard-headed to let a horse get the better of you. Elijah managed a weak smile. Did I at least hold onto her? Daniel laughed, relief evident in his voice. No, you fool. You went down like a sack of grain. But we'll forgive you this once. By the time Dr. Peterson arrived, Elijah was alert enough to complain about the fuss. After examination, the doctor pronounced him concussed but not seriously injured. Keep him quiet for a few days, he instructed. Wake him every few hours tonight to be safe. He's lucky a few inches difference and we'd be having a very different conversation. After the doctor left, with Elijah resting in the spare bedroom under Jim's watchful eye, Sophia found Daniel on the porch, staring into the gathering dusk. He'll be all right, she said, joining him at the railing. Daniel nodded, his face still drawn with concern. I know, but it could have been much worse. This ranch, sometimes I think it demands blood as payment for what it gives us. That's a grim thought. He sighed. My father lost 2 fingers to a rope. My mother's brother was killed when lightning spooked a herd and caused a stampede. This land gives life with one hand and takes it with the other. Sophia reached out, covering his hand with hers. But it's worth it, isn't it? The struggle, the risk for the beauty, the freedom. He turned his hand to clasp hers. Yes, but today reminded me how quickly it can all change. How precious each day is. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the pretense they'd maintained for weeks dissolved. Daniel's free hand came up to touch her cheek, his touch gentle as if she might break or disappear. Sophia, he said, her name like a prayer on his lips. I've been fighting this since the day you arrived, but I can't anymore. I'm falling in love with you. The words sent a cascade of emotion through her: joy, fear, confusion. Daniel, she stopped, uncertain how to express the tangle of her feelings. He withdrew his hand. I'm sorry. That was unfair of me. You're still married, technically. And you work for me. I've put you in an impossible position. No, she said quickly, grasping his hand tighter. That's not it. Well, yes, those things are true, but... She took a deep breath. I have feelings for you too. Strong feelings that terrify me because the last time I trusted a man with my heart, he destroyed my life. Daniel's expression softened. I would never hurt you that way, Sophia. Not intentionally. But I understand your caution. There's also the matter of my marriage, she added reluctantly. Even though David abandoned me, in the eyes of the law, we can consult a lawyer, Daniel said. There must be provisions for abandonment, especially given the circumstances. Hope flickered within her. You would wait? While all that's sorted out. His smile was tender. I would wait years if necessary, Sophia. You're worth waiting for. 3 days later, Sophia received a letter that changed everything again. It had been forwarded from Willow Creek by Mrs. Peabody, who'd promised to send on any correspondence. Her hands trembled as she read the official notification from the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office. David Taylor had been killed in a saloon brawl 2 months earlier. The authorities had only recently identified him and found her name among his possessions. She was a widow. Daniel found her sitting on the porch swing, the letter clutched in her lap, tears streaming silently down her face. Sophia? What's happened? He was by her side instantly, concern etching his features. Wordlessly, she handed him the letter. As he read, his expression shifted from worry to understanding. Are you all right? He asked gently. I don't know what I feel, she admitted. Relief, guilt, anger, grief not for the man he became, but for the man I thought he was when I married him. She looked up at Daniel. Is that terrible of me? No, he said firmly. It's honest. David made his choices, Sophia. Choices that hurt you deeply. You're entitled to whatever feelings come with this news. She nodded, wiping away tears. The letter says they need me to claim his personal effects. There's a small amount of money too, not much, but enough to repay some of the debts he left. Daniel sat beside her on the swing. We can go to Sacramento if you want. Or I can send for the items if you'd prefer not to travel there. The casual "we" wasn't lost on Sophia. Neither was the fact that he didn't suggest she leave alone. I don't need to go, she decided. There's nothing in Sacramento for me. My life is here now. The implications of her words hung between them. Daniel took her hand, his touch grounding her amid the swirl of emotions. Sophia, he said carefully, I don't want to press you when you've just received this news. But I need you to know that my feelings haven't changed. If anything, they've grown stronger every day. She looked into his eyes, seeing the earnest affection there. Mine too. I don't want you as my housekeeper, he continued. I want you as my partner. My wife if you'll have me. He smiled self-consciously. I'm not doing this right. I should be on one knee with a ring, not blurting it out after you've received such news. Sophia squeezed his hand. This is perfect just as it is. Real. Honest. She took a deep breath. Yes, Daniel. I will marry you. Not today or tomorrow, I need time to process everything. But yes, that's what I want too. The joy that transformed his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He gathered her carefully into his arms, as if she were made of spun glass, and kissed her forehead with infinite tenderness. You'll want for nothing with me, Sophia, he whispered against her hair. That's still my promise to you. This time she knew exactly what those words meant. Not just material security, but emotional sanctuary, partnership, love. They were married in October, when the aspen trees turned gold against the mountains and the air carried the first crisp hint of winter. Rebecca Wilson hosted the small ceremony at her ranch, with half the county in attendance. Sophia wore a simple cream dress with lace at the collar and cuffs, and Daniel couldn't take his eyes off her throughout the day. "Mrs. O'Connor," he said that evening as they stood on the porch of what was now truly their home together. "How does it sound?" "Perfect," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "Like it was always meant to be mine." Spring came again, and with it new life. Sophia stood in the garden she'd expanded, one hand resting on her swollen belly as she watched Daniel repair the fence nearby. In less than a month, their child would join them, a daughter, Sophia was certain, though Daniel insisted it would be a son. "Penny, for your thoughts," Daniel called, noticing her watching him. "I was just thinking about that rainy day you found me on my former porch," she replied. "How close I came to refusing your offer." He set down his tools and walked to her, placing his hand over hers on her belly. "I'm grateful every day that you said yes." "So am I." She smiled up at him. "Though I'm not sure you knew what you were getting into, offering to take in a penniless, abandoned wife." "Best decision I ever made," he said, kissing her softly. "I promised you'd want for nothing with me. Have I kept that promise?" Sophia looked around at the flourishing ranch, their home with its fresh curtains and family photographs, and finally back to her husband's beloved face. "More than kept it," she assured him. "You've given me everything I never knew to want: a true partner, a home built on respect, a future filled with hope." She placed her hand against his cheek. "And love, Daniel. So much love." As the Wyoming sun warmed the awakening land around them, Daniel drew his wife close, marveling at how a simple act of kindness on a rainy afternoon had led to the greatest happiness of his life. From the darkest moment of Sophia's life had emerged a love stronger and truer than either of them had dared to imagine, proof that sometimes endings were merely disguised beginnings, waiting for courage enough to embrace them.